Cheers, my people. I made a post about Charlie Mitchell here recently. It was done strategically and for a reason. The great English, or I guess you can say British, middleweight slash heavyweight, who had a lot of success in the early days. The 1880s specifically was his time. There's a video on the channel on Charlie Mitchell. Be sure to check that out if you haven't. I'm working on a video that is related to an opponent of Charlie Mitchell's that I think is going to be pretty excellent, if I don't say so myself. But Charlie Mitchell, one of those fighters, doesn't get a lot of name recognition these days, but trust me when I tell you, he was a force during his time. And the interesting thing about him is that he, much like the fighter that I'm working on, was one of those guys who fought well above his natural weight class, which would have been around middleweight. Now, that was not uncommon. I just did a video on Joe Butler, who fought above middleweight and was commonly associated with heavyweight. He was called the king of the middleweights. Check that out. And Butler, he came to in the late 1880s, so there were some common opponents between he and Charlie Mitchell and his fighter that I'm working on, video-wise. Essentially, that was one of the norms for the time. These guys were well within fighting above their weight class, and it was almost a badge of honor in some sense. Now, Mitchell's most famous opponent, of course, is none other than the Boston Strong Boy, John L. Sullivan. I posted a little factoid on the community page, which was a picture, and I noted that Mitchell was the first man to draw with John L. Sullivan, in addition to being the first man to drop John L. Sullivan. And mind you, this was Mitchell weighing around the middleweight limit, or around middleweight generally, somewhere in that range. So think about that. He was able to drop John L. Sullivan. This was in a contest that they were having. I believe this was New York, actually. And his first round came out, dropped him. Now, he also drew with John L. Sullivan. And this happened in France. This was under London prize ring rules. And from what I recall at the time, it was long and drawn out. 39 rounds, took about 3 hours, somewhere around there. But, of course, thinking about those rules, a round ended when a fighter hit the deck. And sometimes fighters would intentionally do so. And the game plan for Mitchell, which I guess hadn't really been used by any opponents to that point, was to just go down intentionally and draw the fight out. Then it started to rain. Guys were muddy, and it was only a limited amount of individuals who were there watching the contest. And yeah, they ultimately, this was in France as mentioned, they're ultimately like high profile individuals on the richer side. It happened at an estate, and there was an agreement made that the two fighters would declare it a draw. Now, one could argue it doesn't hold as much weight, considering Mitchell chose to not engage as much during this contest. But that being said, he went down with a draw, or went down as a draw, and that's something that stands the test of time, essentially. When you think about Sullivan and his time, Charlie Mitchell's a name that's going to be there. Now, they met on several occasions, as mentioned, or if I didn't mention it, and they're no strangers to each other. And there are a lot of exhibitions, sessions of that nature that were taking place during those periods. Some of them were disguised as such, but these guys were really going at it. So it wasn't an exhibition or sparring session. It was treated as a real fight. But that was a way that you could compete and not run into any issues with the authorities, if you know what I mean. It's boxing, of course. or prize fighting at least, was illegal. And you had to find workarounds. And that they did. But I wanted to bring up Charlie Mitchell because, yes, I'm working on a video associated with an opponent. I think you individuals are going to enjoy it. I truly do. And it'll be released fairly soon. Of course, for the members, it'll come a day earlier. And I look forward to that being the case. I think you'll really appreciate it. I've been working on it. Still doing some things related to the script. Might be within the next couple of weeks. You know, time will tell. It takes a good deal of time to work these. But that being said, certainly worthwhile learning about these great competitors from those periods. So it's no hassle whatsoever. Just a little bit of time, but time well spent. Anyway, I appreciate you all taking the time to check this out, and I'll be back with more.